Hello, I'm Michelle Leduc Catlin. Welcome to episode 9 of season 2 of Trued Up, the podcast that invites you to be the change. For those of you who've been following dissident doctors over the past 5 years, you will definitely know my guest today. You will know her courageous stand for early treatment of COVID-19, when early treatment was oddly forbidden, and that fact was even more oddly accepted. You may have even seen her jaw-dropping recorded call with Dr. Andrew Hill as she tried to appeal to the humanity of a man clearly compromised by the controlling powers of the WHO. And if you haven't, see the show notes for a link. But what you may not know about Dr. Tess Lawrie is her personal journey from a shy scientist to an outspoken international advocate for public health. Along with her work with the World Council for Health, it is Tess's transformation, her appreciation for the arts, and her uplifting vision of the future that inspired me to invite her to be my guest today on Trued Up. It is so lovely to see you again, Tess. I'm so grateful to you for this interview. I have no words.
It was so lovely to see you in person, meet you in person in Bath in May. And I think you were very kind to share your cheesecake with me. I remember very memorable cheesecake. Thank you.
Well, I have to thank you for sharing your chocolate dessert.
Yeah, we were good lunch companions, weren't we?
We were. We definitely were. I hope we have the opportunity to do it again. So I want to start with your background, just to give people a sense of what it is you were doing before the COVID years and how you came to this point, or at least let's say that's too big a timeline. How you came to see what was not working within the medical establishment.
Well, perhaps I'll start off with this point, and I'm in agreement with Terence McKenna now, where he said human beings are much better suited to dancing than anything else they have been doing. And that's kind of where I'm at now, just reflecting on the journey. I could never, as a child, really understand authority in adults. So, school and all of that was really, I was one of those children that was very quiet, because not wanting to make any mistakes, because I didn't really know the rules of things. I was a high achiever. I got, in that sense that I learned how to jump through all the hoops, but I was very timid and unsure of myself, as I say, because I didn't know the rules. I got sort of funneled into the science and maths route because that was what the vocational guidance counselor said I should do. Either it was maths, either it was something, either it was medicine, or it was engineering, or it was, actuarial science or something, all these ghastly, well, no, I shouldn't say all these ghastly things, but generally all these very reason-based things, when actually I was quite a creative child, and I loved arts and crafts and that sort of thing. But, the nature of education these days is to sort of funnel one into a university degree that serves industry or something to fall back on or whatever. Anyway, so at the age of 17, I went off to university and studied medicine. And when I graduated, I decided I wanted to be in the, pregnancy and childbirth arena, because that's sort of not disease based. It's really very, it's very beautiful. It's a very beautiful area to work in. We're dealing with birth and new life. And so I found my niche there for a while. And then I fell pregnant. I was working very, very hard, in the I studied in South Africa, and I graduated. I worked in South Africa in very, very busy hospitals, very large hospitals, and and when I was a registrar, which is a sort of clinical fellow in training for obstetrics and gynecology, I fell pregnant, and anyway, cut a long story short, my baby died when it was just a few days old, and so I really took that to heart. I felt to blame because of that, and that has shaped probably the next 30 years of my life, because I felt responsible, and I felt like a terrible mother and a terrible doctor and so on. And so I went into research, and I did a PhD on the effect of injectable contraceptives on postnatal depression, and I had three more beautiful children. So having a family became really important to me, and so but during the course of that, I became involved, in part of my PhD was to conduct a Cochrane systematic review. And this is in the 90s, where the Cochrane collaboration was fairly new, and this idea of synthesizing bodies of evidence to help clinicians make sense of all the scientific studies out there was fairly innovative. And I was lucky to work with Professor Justice Hoffmeyer in South Africa, who one of the sort of leading proponents of the Cochrane methodology. So I rapidly became quite experienced in Cochrane systematic reviews. Sorry, if you'd like to.
No. The only thing I want to interject is so that people understand the Cochrane review is considered the gold standard of evidence-based medicine, right? So, wow.
Yes. So synthesizing these bodies of evidence to help organizations like the World Health Organization or country government health departments decide what treatments to use in various circumstances and so on. But and then we were struck by another tragedy. Actually, as a family, we had a violent burglary, and the three children were all distressed, and my husband was injured quite badly, and we sort of focused on getting well, and we relocated to the United Kingdom thereafter. Really, we felt it was for the safety of the children, although now, of course, one realizes that the Western world is a very unsafe place to be. Anyway, so we recovered from that, and during that time, just thereafter, I established a limited company called the Evidence-Based Medicine Consultancy, and I did work as an external consultant. So I received pretty much ongoing work from 2012 from the World Health Organization, and my role with them was to synthesize evidence and be what they call a guideline methodologist to support clinical practice guidelines. So, my expertise was in helping, it was in preparing the evidence and then helping the panels of stakeholders from around the world agree recommendations based on the evidence, and then I write up the documents. So that's what I was doing before COVID, and even a little bit into COVID. But then, when the COVID scam was launched, and I had a real gut feeling that it was, a scam, and they didn't have the evidence to support the policies and things that they were rolling out, let alone the dangerous jabs. I realized that, I needed to step in and do something. I do have to say that prior to that, I had been having misgivings about the system of systematic reviewing that seems to prioritize randomized controlled trials and all the other evidence that might that might be collated. If you think about randomized controlled trials just being the sort of tip of the pyramid, and all the other evidence, all those PhDs that are done by fellows around the world, scientists and doctors, just get ignored for the randomized controlled trials at the top, which are becoming increasingly expensive to conduct and are mainly run by pharmaceutical companies. So you never really know what the bias is and the influence of the drug companies is. So I was becoming disillusioned. I was also becoming disillusioned with the WHO because I had really, I was very excited when I first got to work with WHO because I thought, well, this is going to be an opportunity to really help people, really make a big difference. And then I saw that that we weren't making a big difference, that, there was this money coming in from the Gates Foundation and a sort of vying for grants and things which seemed to affect the direction of the work that we were doing. So I was, before COVID, really questioning my role as a scientist and a researcher. And I would say I wasn't terribly, I wasn't sort of content from the work point of view, but I didn't know what else there was. So, and obviously one has mortgages and things. So I had at that time, and, so then COVID came along and I met Dr. Andrew Hill. Things changed.
So for those people in North America, and particularly who don't know who Dr. Andrew Hill is, and I want to get to your astonishing recorded conversation with him, can you just give us a little bit of background?
Well, I saw a statement by Dr. Pierre Corey in the December of 2020 highlighting that ivermectin was really helping people with COVID symptoms and that it would be a game changer. And so I did a systematic review and it was clear that, I agreed with him. Looking at all the research, safe old medicine, it was a no-brainer, really. We should have just been using it and the government should all have known about it. And that there wouldn't have been any cause for concern and everyone would have, now we know there actually wasn't. It was all manufactured. But back then we were being told thousands of people were dying every day from COVID, So Pierre introduced me to Dr. Andrew Hill, who was the assigned WHO systematic reviewer. He was as an external consultant from the University of Liverpool, and his position seemed to have been funded by Unitaid. And anyway, he'd been working on this for some months, and I had wondered what was taking him so long. But we had a meeting and, we had a couple of calls and email correspondence, at which time I could see that he didn't actually have the experience to do that kind of systematic reviewing. And I was having to give him a lot of pointers about assessing risk of bias and all of that stuff and grading the evidence. So I thought, well, let's just invite him on board and we do a systematic review together quickly. We've got a great team. I had excellent statistician from Newcastle University. We had a health economist. We had consumer representatives and other systematic reviewers. I said, let's just do this quickly and we'll get it out and save lives and stop the jabs and all that stuff. And he very quickly published a very flawed review on a preprint service. It wasn't peer-reviewed or anything. And so when I saw this, I messaged him and said, please, can we meet? Because this is going to cause immeasurable harm. I said, it's a terrible review. I can explain to you why. And I wasn't the only one who thought that. Subsequently, Dr. Pierre Corey and Dr. Paul Marek from FLCCC, the Frontline COVID Care Alliance in the US, wrote to him as well. So, and also it was as if he was saying one thing and doing another, because he'd been saying he was really going to help get ivermectin approved. And then he'd published this thing, which actually said, even though there was an 80% or 75% reduction in deaths, the authorities or health regulators couldn't look at the evidence until more studies were done. And this pushed it down the line, months and months, turned into years. So we had a meeting, and I recorded most of the meeting. It was sort of part through. I thought I should record this, and I pressed record. He would have known because at that stage Zoom had a flashing light on it, and we had a frank conversation. And I was just absolutely aghast at the quite clearly the corruption and the forces at play that had influenced his paper and his conclusions. So at that time, he said 6 weeks and then we'll approve it. Don't worry, it's just going to be 6 weeks. And I was saying, well, look, how many people are dying every day? But the 6 weeks passed and nothing happened. I corresponded with him and still nothing happened. So at that stage, I was so aware that the whole COVID thing was just a scam and corruption, that there was some reason they wanted these injections out. I had looked at the evidence, the literature to support the genetic technology, the mRNA and the AstraZeneca technologies, and there was no evidence to support there was no science, published science, to back up the genetic vaccine technology. So right from the get-go, I knew there wasn't the evidence. And so I realized there must be something going on. And even in the January of 2021, the World Health Organization's Vigi-based database, which is a pharmacovigilance database, had around 86,000 adverse reactions already. That was in January 2021.
So I want to go back to that conversation because I wrote about that conversation, and I will tell you, Tess, I don't know how you held it together with so much dignity, and also you were very firm and yet kind. You were very straightforward, but managed to keep your composure. How did you do that? What was I don't even know how to ask it. What is it that you think gave you that strength to be able to have that conversation the way you did?
I knew the conversation was really important. And I just felt if I could just get through to him on a human level, then we could change everything, I was just trying to connect with him on that human level. And I wanted to keep the conversation going in the hope that we could make that connection. Because, I'm sure he's not a bad man. I think the way that we've been spoiled, corrupted, I think we're all capable of doing terrible things. It has been shown in scientific experiments. So when something becomes the norm, like the corruption of science, and I suppose Dr. Hill's working in it every day, and he's being paid for this and paid for that, and the drug companies are saying, can you just remove that sentence from there and let's call this 80% instead, so when that's your bread and butter, and you probably just think this is what everybody's doing. And I think for me it's a real wake-up call, not just for Andrew Hill, but for the whole of humanity, because this is where we're at. People don't act on their conscience anymore, and it's been okay. If it's for money, anything's okay, and it's not okay.
I love that, and I want to underscore what you've just said, because it really points to the banality of evil. It's not somebody sitting behind the scenes going, wahaha, how do we do this? It's every single one of us who is just shifting the barriers of what's acceptable and what's true. What I love, and I'm going to put a link to that video in the show notes, because it was like I could hardly breathe. It was so cringeworthy, and not in a funny way. It was just like you could see in his body language, in his hesitancy, you could see that he was grappling with his own humanity, and you just kept on. And it was a real turning point, I think. So after that happened, what shifted for you?
Well, it was a turning point for me because, I've always, as I say, been quite shy. And at that point, I had a little office at the top of a building, and the pigeons were my friends, on the windowsill. And I communicated with my colleagues via Zoom and, travel remotely. Occasionally, I was terrified of public speaking, really. That was the thing that always really terrified me. So I realized, that I just had to put my fear aside and try and raise the alarm on things, and that's what I did. For we formed the BIRD group, the British Ivermectin Recommendation Development Group, and we prepared a pack of evidence, just like I would have prepared for the WHO if I'd gone there to, for one of their guideline development meetings, and I prepared it exactly the same way, and we disseminated that to the WHO and elsewhere, and didn't get a response. And then we kept on. We held many Zoom meetings, and we held a conference called the International Ivermectin for COVID Conference. And I must just say, it's not because that I think ivermectin is the miracle drug and all that stuff, and it's really because it was the key to unlocking this. The corruption of science, because there was Andrew Hill, although at that stage I hadn't shared that video, but there, for me, it's really about the fact that there were many supplements and healthy activities, and including sunshine and getting out in nature, that might have helped people who had symptoms of COVID. Now, I know there's a whole bunch of people who say, well, if COVID didn't exist and the pandemic didn't exist, then there's no point in treating anything early. Well, people did have symptoms. I personally had those strange symptoms with a really bad kind of flu, with the loss of taste and smell, which I've never had before with a flu. So there was something, and we can call it COVID, or we can call it COVID symptoms, or something else. I'm open to suggestions about what may have caused that, but for all intents and purposes, there were things that would have helped people. And most of these things really were aimed at boosting the immune system, which is very much what ivermectin does, as does vitamin D and C and zinc and all these other things.
It strikes me, what you're saying about whatever it was is so important, because I think part of our downfall is getting caught up in opinions about what something is, where it came from, rather than dealing with what is so. And I love your work, and I'm going to get into all the things you're doing a little bit later, but I love the fact that you're focused on solutions.
Yeah, the devil is in the detail. That's, something my grandmother would say, and I know people are familiar with that phrase, but the devil is in the detail. And the more one gets trapped in the detail of things, you lose sight of the big picture, and the big picture is really what we need to focus on now. So I did do that detail thing for a while, and then we realized, actually, this is big, and there's many people going to be harmed, and humanity and the planet's in grave danger. And this is pretty early on 2021, and that's why we formed the World Council for Health.
So tell us a little bit about that, and what the mission was and where it is now, because it seems to have expanded quite a bit.
Yeah, well, I don't know if there's been an organization that's had to grow so quickly as this one, but it's grown very organically. We set up in September 2021. We also had a World Ivermectin Day in July 2021. And we just celebrated the fourth one. But the next step was the World Council for Health, and we set it up really to show people that there were safe, easy things they could do at home or in their gardens to reduce their risk of getting sick from anything, and also and COVID, of course. But also to raise awareness about the vaccine. So we really were the first organization internationally to raise awareness that the jabs were dangerous, and we issued a cease and desist notice in the December 2021, alerting people to the fact that if they were to administer, promote, manufacture, involved in any of those things, to do with these genetic injections, they might be held personally liable one day. So, so there were many. So at that, and the other thing with World Council for Health is we basically are a coalition of partner groups. So up until that stage, BIRD, British Ivermectin Group, had established a number of international partners, and some of those partners, many of them had actually been afraid to speak out about ivermectin, and then many were afraid to speak out about the vaccine. So in many ways, we provided a sort of foil between people who really were concerned, but not really wanting to put their heads above the parapet, and the public, so that people could receive those messages. World Council for Health. I mean, it sounds like a very grand title. We were going to call it the Council for Health, but that was already taken. So we
You had to go big.
we had and our website guy said, look, go big. And so we were just a handful of international activists, doctors, scientists, and lawyers. And we said, okay, we're going to be the World Council for Health. And we had representation from the international groups. And then, of course, early in 2022, we realized that there are all these negotiations going underway to give the WHO power to declare pandemics willy-nilly, and then to determine what the response should be. So that became and we did a survey amongst our supporters, because at that stage, what we had done from the very get-go with World Council for Health was we'd had a weekly live-streamed meeting. And so it was really to give hope and help to people and let them know there are people talking about these things. Because if you remember back then, people were so afraid to talk about what was happening. And so if there was a bunch of people going live every Monday, talking about these things as if they're just, ordinary things that people should be talking about, it would give them courage to do so, and also support them during the time that was very, very difficult for people. So we've been doing that, and then we asked the supporters, what do you want us to do? Now we've got this far, what sort of things? And they said, well, could you help raise awareness of the vaccines, and could you be a new WHO? So we hadn't actually really even thought of being necessarily, well, no, that's not quite true, because when we had set up Shabnam Paleso Mohammed, a new friend, she interviewed me in January 2021, and we became firm friends. She said, oh, we need to make a new people's organization. And I said, no, that just sounds like too much trouble. That's hard work. How do you do that? So, but then, as I say, we got this thing saying, the survey came back saying a new World Health Organization. So we thought, no, we certainly don't need any more hierarchical institutions. So what does a new World Health Organization, a health advocacy organization, look like? And we realized, well, what it is, it's actually restoring control of health back to the hands of people. And not only that, health, in order to be healthy, you have to have choice, and you have to be able to act on your conscience, not follow orders. So what we need to do is we need to be advocates for health and sovereignty, teaching people about their rights, as well as how to get healthy and maintain good health, so that one reduces dependency on these corrupt corporations.
What are you called to do? And what gets in your way? There was a time when I was self-sabotaging my own goals, my dreams, so much so that I ended up with chronic fatigue and unable to work for 7 years. Have you ever had a time when you wanted to do something to produce better results in a particular area of your life, but you just couldn't seem to get past a certain point? We all have a tendency to self-sabotage, whether it's with our health, our career, our relationships, or our finances. Maybe you're experiencing that now. And I want to tell you that it's not your fault. We are bombarded with programming that is designed to keep us weak, dependent, sick, and broke. And as someone who has been weak, dependent, sick, and broke, I can tell you that you don't have to stay there. As a certified self sabotage coach, I work with clients one on one to distinguish their unique sabotaging patterns and habits and teach you how to reprogram for success in any area of life. If this sounds like something that you'd like to explore, email me for a free discovery call to see if we're a fit. It's Michelle, with two L's and an E, at gatheryourwits.com. And now back to some empowering programming.
I hadn't seen that. I see that you have many different initiatives, many different websites. I mean, there's so much, but I really love making the connection of personal sovereignty, personal responsibility, which ties into what we were talking about before about people no longer following their own principles, right? Which is essentially what this show is about truing up to your principles, to your values, to what you know is right. And so I see all the different things. Why do you think it is that some people are trued up and others aren't? Why do you think some people could see all of this or were willing to see it and some people aren't?
I think that's a really complex question because we haven't really figured out yet what's actually going on here. Sometimes I think it's just a theater of sorts, and we're all, we've all been given a role, and, perhaps behind the scenes, we're all drinking tea together. I don't know. But I think certainly the years of the globalist agenda has been going a long time and has been whittling away at the spirit of humanity. And so I feel there are some who cannot come back from a place of fear, and that's okay. That's their journey. But I think there are others that that upon realizing and seeing what that things were wrong, that things didn't make sense, they actually have actively been seeking the truth. And I think that that's becomes very liberating, because the more you find that resonates, the more you grow and are able to step away from the fear. So I think I don't hold grudges against anyone who's going to take more of these injections and will continue to do as they're told. I think that's their it's their journey. Just like those people who have woken up and said, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. I welcome them and look forward to creating this better way together.
I think that attitude is really prevalent in the background of all of the different things you're involved with, because as I looked over your website, so there's the World Council for Health, World Ivermectin Day, the Bird Group, Better Way Events, EBMC Squared. I mean, there's an incredible list, but there's something that behind that is uplifting. In every one of them, there's a sense of empowerment, a sense of even, I'll say, joy. And I'm not seeing that in a lot of other organizations or websites. Is that intentional? Is it just who you are?
It is intentions who we are as an organization, because World Council of Health is made up now of, really made up of volunteers who share the spirit, so and all around the world, we wouldn't be where we are just with the steering committee, for example. And now we have an organization that functions and will continue to function with or without the core team, that has started it up. because we are, in essence, decentralizing everything down to, you know, the fundraising and the community events and all of that. So whilst we're growing, the responsibility actually gets less in a funny way. But in terms of the ethos, we held, you know, in going back to early 2022, we were very much aware that there was a lot of sort of negativity in the media, and anger, and it became clear that you can't react your way out of tyranny. You know, you can't comply your way out of tyranny. You have to get creative and come up with solutions. And so we held a Better Way conference in 2022, and we explored very solutions focused. We had all these great speakers. They didn't have a lot of time to speak, mind you, and we had panel conversations. And you can access those recordings, which are still very relevant to today, because we looked at media, we looked at science, what happened to the law and human rights. We looked at the consequences of COVID. We looked at new and integrative approaches to health, and also environmental issues, but in these really nice, relatively concise sound bites. The panels were sort of 2 or 3 hours, but just if you go and have a look at betterwayevents.org, you'll see it's really colorful and entertaining, I would say, and very solutions focused. Yes. And out of that very solutions focused conference came the Better Way principles, because we had undertaken to write up summaries of all the panel conversations afterwards. And we kept sort of reducing it, and then we ended up basically with 7 principles, and that was it, you know. So I'll just say them to you. You can find them on the website, but it's
I have
you've got them, so you can show them. But they're really simple.
Go ahead and read them.
Okay. Well, so it's one: we act in honor and do no harm, and that basically comes from, you know, the law, not legal. That's law, as in natural law, universal law, how we get along together. And then we are free. Well, we have free will, so we are responsible for our choices, whether we choose to act on our conscience or do our own research or follow orders. It's all a choice. And that's why, you know, when it comes to COVID and whatever, you know, anything, we can't really blame others. I think it's about acknowledging that we're responsible in some way for how we got there. And then we're part of nature, so we need nature more than we know, more than we realize, and nature needs us. We need to work together with nature, and we are a benefit to the planet. The globalists don't want us to know that, but we are. And spirituality is integral to our well-being. We need a life of meaning and purpose. You know, we need a reason to wake up in the morning because we're going to do something great, help somebody, or, you know, create something. When everything's done for us, we are not happy. Convenience is not, God sent. Convenience is really impairs us and distracts us from our purpose. And then we thrive together. You know, we thrive with the older people, with our elders and our children all living together. We shouldn't be putting old people in nursing homes and our elders with all their wisdom. We shouldn't be separated from them. I feel really passionately about that. And but not just that, you know, we thrive in communities, not with big walls, and we need to communicate with one another. And then we value different perspectives, and this is one of the tricky things I think we've all struggled with during the past few years. Is we want other people to believe what we believe, and we don't understand why they don't see things our way, you know. But really, this is how we learn and grow, and by recognizing that other people are seeing exactly the same thing a different way. And we need to sort of take that into account and learn and grow and be able to just sit with it, and not all agree all the time. An example that my friend Shabnam uses is a 6 and a 9. Depending where you're standing, a 6 can look like a 9. And both people are right, whether you're claiming it's a 6 or a 9. That's just one simple example. And then the 7th principle is we use technology with discernment. And I think this is, such an important principle as we, about to be uploaded into cyberspace. Our children are, especially. We need to pull back on harmful technology while we can. So underpinning those 7 principles is really the courage of our convictions, the courage for us to stand up and say, we do not tolerate the violation of human rights and freedoms, including freedom of speech and, all of freedom of bodily autonomy, freedom to travel and move around. And we do not tolerate the profit, power, and influence being put before people and the earth.
That almost feels like a meditation. There's so much wisdom in all of that. I mean, if we really take the time, I want to go back and explore a little bit of some of the things you said. So the idea of being free beings with free will and the responsibility we have, this is one of the themes that I keep finding, is that we have been, even with people who see what's happening, there's a lot of focus on our rights and how our rights have been taken away. And while that's all true, there's not as much focus on responsibility, on what we can do, on our free will, on our choices. And I think that's part of what's so powerful about your websites. The other part of it, and I'm just going to kind of speak, and then you can respond however you'd like. But the other part of it is that you have grown something very beautiful. And I see also that responsibility, because we have a perception of responsibility as something heavy or burdensome, we don't see the opportunity. And there's this beautiful opportunity right now. We are growing into our best selves. So
yeah, I actually, the other day, I thought we're becoming human. It's like we're remembering who we are, and we're becoming, our fullest potential. Well, there's the opportunity to do that now. And the, what everybody needs to understand or get to a point of is realizing that great change is here, whether you're ready for it or not. It's a bit like having a baby. When you go into labor, you don't know when it's going to happen, but when it does happen, it's there, and there's no turning back, and there's only one way. And, so that's where we're at. Great change has arrived, and we can either ignore it and just go with what, the Great Reset, or whatever it is they want to call this globalist agenda, to basically frog march us into the prison neighborhoods and things. Or we can say, this is a great opportunity. I actually, and think, really imagine the world you want to live in, and then create it, together with your friends and family and your community.
Have you always had this attitude, or is it something that's developed over the last few years, or a combination?
I've been growing and learning like others. I used to live in fear of money and not being able to do this, not being able to do that. But what I believe now is that, this is a challenge to each and every one of us. It's a challenge of self-mastery. And that's all we have to do here, is we have to master our fears and our emotions and our reactions to things. And we just have to be be the best that we can be, and be true to ourselves, to really act on our conscience. And it's not that easy because, we get angered and we get irritated and we get uh, uh, provoked, and so it does require constant vigilance and recalibration. But we don't have to invent the wheel. There've been many prophets and books and songs, and there's much guidance for us at this time, and we need to look at that guidance, and take it on board. And we need to even on a just a day by day basis think, how can I extract myself from the matrix today so that I can also help others in this movement to a better way. And I think there are many people who might even be watching who haven't thought of checking their share portfolios. I don't have any shares, but you might well find, if you look in your share portfolio, that you're supporting weapons manufacturers, and weapons are there wars are only there because weapons exist and weapon manufacturers need to use them, just like dangerous biological genetic injections are only there because they're being facilitated. And I mean, what am I saying? The vaccination campaigns are there because all of these things are being created, and it's a money-making thing. So if you have shares in Pfizer and AstraZeneca, any drug company, I would say look very carefully. And it's not, and obviously not just shares. If you're whatever you're doing, you're using plastic, and you can reduce waste, or reduce your time on digital tech, help your children do the same. There's many things you can do, and so there's practical things that are needed as well as the inner work to.
Yeah, I'm struck. It's so true. I think people sometimes they look at all of it and they feel so overwhelmed. And when we've all heard that, I'm just one person, what can I do? Said 8 billion people.
Yes.
But really, one of the things I like about your website, The Great Reset, is that you've got some very simple, empowering things to do. So escaping the digital dungeon, right? Removing or even limiting your time with your devices. Maybe you could go over some of those.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd be happy to say some of the things that I do now.
Oh, good.
That practices that I've taken on board. And so I don't use a mobile phone. I mean, I don't turn it on for most of the day. So I'm almost not using it. I've sort of been weaning myself off the mobile phone. So I have apps on my laptop, and I Ethernet cable my laptop. So I'm not exposed to.
Bravo.
It's really easy. People don't realize how easy it is. The cable costs about $10 or something. You plug it into your router, turn off the Wi-Fi, and the next thing you're not exposed to Wi-Fi anymore. But people don't seem to know this. So it's very, very easy. I'm not a tech person, but that just, it struck me as an incredibly easy thing to do, to immediately reduce your exposure to radio frequency radiation and electromagnetic fields. So I do, and my mobile phone I turn on now it really is only if someone sends me a text message or a call. So but most of the people I know would know how to contact me via email or via my laptop. So I'm almost at a point of not having to use the mobile phone at all. And days will go by where I don't access it. So that's the mobile phone taken care of. From a food point of view, I don't shop in supermarkets. I haven't been in a supermarket for years now. And we only eat whole food. So people always say, oh, well, that's really expensive. And but in actual fact, I can tell you, between my husband and myself, we spend about 100 to 120 pounds a week on food between us. And that is because we don't buy anything in plastic. We don't buy any condiments that are with long lives and things, unless it's a homemade jam or something from, so homemade jam or honey. We only eat vegetables and fruit. I say only. We're so blessed to be able to access vegetables and fruit. The fruit is a box that gets delivered from Riverford once a week, and then the vegetables come from the farmers market. So they're not labeled, they're not organic, but we know the farmer and we know he doesn't use glyphosate and pesticides. And honestly, we spend about 14 or 15 pounds on a massive bag of vegetables every week at the market. So on Saturday we spend 15 pounds on vegetables. We spend we get duck eggs as well thrown in that. So that includes sort of 2 boxes of duck eggs. And that's sort of 3 meals for the week, and then a bit of wild game meat, so maybe another 30 or 40 pounds on meat. And that's it. And at the end of the week, the fridge is empty because there's no mayonnaise or ketchup or anything else, and so, I really like living this way because I can identify the food, and it's extremely tasty because we also have a very tiny garden, but we have a lot of herbs. Mm-hmm. And now with every meal, virtually, I take a handful of herbs and put it with my food. So it's sage and oregano, marjoram, lemon balm, mint, licorice mint, and all of that. So we're eating so incredibly healthy. I've never eaten so healthily, and we have 2 meals a day. So we no longer do that early breakfast. We only eat at 1 or 2 o'clock. Have a good coffee, though. I do like a good coffee in the morning. But after that, I eat at like 1 or 2 o'clock. Fresh fruit and nuts. So nuts is the other thing that is added to our bill. But you can see how it's very inexpensive. And then we have, and it's no cakes, no sugar or any of that, or no bought stuff. We make cakes, but it's none of that bought stuff that's long life, using seed oils. The only oils we use are coconut oil, olive oil, but none of those bad seed oils. So people are of the opinion, like occasionally, I posted a picture of my breakfast the other day on Twitter, and the immediate response was, "Oh, that looks like it cost a lot," And then I broke it down and I said, actually, all the green leaves are just from my pot plants and all the herbs. And in actual fact, it costs less than your Starbucks coffee this morning,
Everything you take in with your senses, everything you hear, see, eat, and surround yourself with is programming you to succeed or fail. Over the past 5 years, we have all been subjected to an enormous amount of disempowering programming. If you're anything like me, you have experienced a point where all the information you were taking in was actually damaging your health, your relationships, your productivity, or all of the above. It's why I produce programming to empower people, and it's why I became a freedom from self-sabotage coach. We are living in extraordinary times, and we will either succumb to the constant negative programming, or we will become alchemists and transmute our challenges into victories. We will become the people we've been waiting for. If you're interested in working with me, either in a group or one-on-one, as a coach or a speaker, just email me at Michelle, with 2 L's and an E, at gatheryourwits.com, and let's have a conversation. Now back to some empowering programming.
I love that you taking us through exactly, because I eat actually very much like you do. And it's so, I think we've been so trained. Again, you talked about convenience. We've been, what's the word? Like coddled, massaged. We've been weakened to believe that, first of all, convenience is a virtue somehow, that it makes our lives better. when convenience is not always better. As you said, it doesn't make us happy, but preparing a simple meal using, I mean, the vegetables and the meats from the, good sources, they're delicious just in and of themselves. And not buying prepared foods, which, are full of unhealthy ingredients and all of that. Anyway, yeah, that's
the other thing that my husband makes. He makes kimchi a lot. Now, kimchi is like, or sauerkraut. You use a whole cabbage. You get about 3 jars worth, and it's unbelievably tasty. And it's fermented product, so it's extremely good for the gut. For gut health, and the gut nervous system is your second brain. I mean, some say it's your first brain. So, those homemade fermented products, brilliant. And the other thing that he makes he makes these jars of brines, which I guess is also a kind of ferment, and it's just I'm sure on YouTube. I mean, I never watch them do it, but I'm always amazed as how tasty the food is when it's just been, a bit of meat or whatever chucked in this brine and stewed for an hour or two. How flavorful, because it'll have garlic or ginger or some leaves or lemons or herbs or whatever, and it just sits there for weeks and weeks. And then you use it, whenever you need it. So these things are really simple techniques to make food very, very tasty at very low cost, very low cost.
So some of the other tips or ideas that you have on the website include, so you've talked about, getting away from digital. You've talked about buying local. You also talk about bartering and using cash.
Yeah, and it's also bolstering local communities with your skills. So these things all kind of go hand in hand, because if you have a certain skill, just say you're a great graphics artist or something, and somebody needs a leaflet, or maybe IT and other people are growing veg, or it's really great to be able to. I mean, the other day I think I got a haircut, a hair blow dry. So there are all these different things, and it's so refreshing and rewarding when you do strike up that conversation with somebody and you realize you've got different skills, and you need, there's sort of ways you can collaborate together or help one another. And so, yeah. And then of course it reduces the amount of cash you need, the amount of money you need, and your dependency on the banks. So, and all the middlemen that take your things. I mean, the other thing is sort of thinking about all the things one spends money on. For example, insurances and life insurances, and all of these things that we're convinced to get for a rainy day. How about stepping away from that fear? How much money would you save stepping away from that fear? I mean, I stepped away from that fear a long time ago. What's the worst thing that can happen? Anyway,
but there's a few things there. So one is, it's interesting just to look at how many of our decisions are made based on fear.
Yes.
So even just the questioning is valuable. I mean, a lot of people ended up taking the injection because of fear of losing their jobs, a job that they didn't necessarily even like. What else could be possible if you started creating your future, not based on trying to keep a job?
Yes. Right? Yeah. I would certainly recommend to people, if you don't like your job, get rid of it. And do something else, go and, I don't know, go farming or gardening or something for a little while and think about things. I've never been happier since just literally jumping off a cliff saying, I'm going to do this. I've had to close my evidence-based medicine consultancy. If I never looked at another scientific paper again in my life, I'd be as happy as can be, because I don't wish to engage in that anymore. The things that I like doing the most are talking to people. And that's the very thing that I lived in fear of my entire life, because I love humanity, and I love hearing people's stories. and finding that common ground. And people are so interesting. So, when we go out now, the things I love, I could show you a couple of videos of that, or maybe it wouldn't work on here, but, we go out into communities with, a little gang of WCH volunteers, and we have these backpacks now. It's like a little backpack with some leaflets in the front and flags, and the flags just say, "Tell me about your health," or they're bright pink, so you can't miss them, and pretty cheerful, or ask me about recovery from vaccine injury, or ask me about 5G, or, it depends. There's all sorts of different flags, but it's wonderful. People come and tell you their story, and you're able to help them make sense of what's going on. We've just come back from Japan, and we did the same thing. And it's it's not just me who enjoys this kind of activity. Everybody loves it, because when you're sharing like that, and you really feel like you're making a difference.
I hear another difference in what you're doing, and that is that there's so many people just pumping out information, and people can only take so much. So even those who understand what's going on, I mean, at some point I just had to unsubscribe from 50 things, because what value is it providing for me, and what value am I providing for other people by just sharing that? What's really, I hear, different and workable is asking questions. And it's far more interesting, and it's not confrontational. If we just ask questions, and particularly just the question, "Tell me about your health."
Yes.
I mean, then you get to hear a lot about where people are and what you can provide for them. And you're being of service rather than foisting an opinion or even facts on them.
Yeah, sometimes you don't even have to say anything. You can just stand there with a smile. And there was one very poignant moment when we were in Tokyo. We were in the Tokyo station, and the team had their flags, and were busy. They were doing something, and this woman, probably a bit younger than me, pushed a wheelchair past me with a young boy, and he was about 10 years old, and quite severely damaged, and I would think from an early age, and he wasn't able to walk. And I saw her look at the poster, and then she sort of hesitated, took another step or two forward, and then stopped, and she looked again, and then she just very subtly sort of nodded and moved on. So even though she didn't have that conversation, it felt so important that it was there, and it helped to make that connection, that this could very well be the reason for her son's handicap, and damage. So it's very rewarding work. I mean, sometimes one can be quite tearful, and the team members will come back, and there's a mix of feeling because of what they've heard and what's been shared with them. But generally speaking, it's the most rewarding work, and it's the thing that everybody in the team loves to do the most, and what we're trying to encourage our volunteers around the world to do now. And there is a World Council for Health Canada. I hope you're aware of that. I know that they've sort of been in the setup phases, but it's a very strong group, and I'm sure that they will adopt this flag method, as well as the backpack and the flag, because it's really a wonderful way of supporting the community and getting the conversations going.
That's so beautiful. I mean, it's something all of us can do. You don't even have to have a lot of answers, just
Yeah.
to provide that listening to people.
And so many people have been so frustrated because they've had information they wanted to share, and nobody's been around to listen and all of that. But with this method, you stand there and people come to you, so you're not trying to put your message on to people who aren't willing to hear. You're actually having people come to you and ask, wanting to see the leaflet or wanting to tell you their story.
I want to say that, when you were talking about the 7 principles of a better way, one of the things was valuing different perspectives. And my experience has been that, I used to have very clear views about politics and, opinions about things. And as soon as I began to let that go, it was like there was this smorgasbord of wonderful, creative ideas, new ways to think of things, right? I don't even have to agree with them, but just to be able to hear them. And I don't know, it made me think of that when you were talking about going out with this flag and just listening to people, meeting them where they're at.
I so love what you said there, Michelle, just about uh, being able to hold all of these different ideas and options and things and just be happy with the uncertainty of it. I love doing that too. And there's so many fascinating things that I've learned and possibilities of things that I never before would have entertained, or people would have said, well, that's just crazy or whatever. I didn't feel afraid of entertaining those things anymore and just letting them sit there and say, well, there's lots of things I thought I knew and I was wrong. So I'm prepared to just let that sit there for a while, even though it looks crazy or sounds crazy.
I used to, in a personal development course I was involved with, they used to say that being right is the booby prize. And I really see that today is that, and I see it in myself first, right? That the things I was so right about really limited what was possible because I couldn't see beyond, what I thought to be true. And now there's just so much more possible. So I really like that spin on it. It's not just that, yes, there's this huge array of horrible things that are happening and horrible things that maybe people are planning and doing to us. But that means there's also a huge possibility of what we can create, right? Because
Yeah.
it's really wide open. I want to talk about some of the other ways. So one of the things I really appreciated was that you recently had a detox fair. So I thought that was a very fun, clever way to, instead of, again, it's sort of the dire messaging of all the horrible things, but, a detox fair. What, what was the impetus for that? What was that like?
And everybody needs to detox, and we've got this idea that the people who've been jabbed are the ones at greatest risk, but we're all being subject to all manner of toxins, environmental toxins and more. So we all need to be detoxing and taking back control of our health. It's really aimed at everybody. And the detox fair came about because we'd held an annual Better Way conference, which was quite a wonderful affair. And, we had people coming from all over to speak, but it felt like we had sort of done it in a way. We'd covered all the topics, we'd come up with solutions, and it seemed like the time for action was here. And that action is obviously to get help to people and help them improve their health. So, and we wanted to make something more accessible as well, less expensive, and actually we wanted to sort of model it, create a template that could be done in other countries and communities. So, because we're not about establishing a new hierarchical structure, we want to empower and give voice and platform to new leaders and healers, and in the community. So, the one that we held was in the UK. It was a 2-day event. It cost around, I think it was $49 a day, but it was really jam packed. We had exhibitors with stalls, so people could come and they could speak with organic supplement suppliers or whatever, and learn about it. We had some laboratories doing blood tests for people who wanted to see what their vitamin D levels were, or live blood analysis and that sort of thing, and some new technologies to be tried out. We had a tent with therapists offering taster sessions of their methods, so aromatherapy, for example, or these things that people don't necessarily know of, and I certainly didn't know too much about prior to 2020. So
But that's what's so great about that is often these modalities can be a bit expensive and you don't want to necessarily take a chance, but to go to someplace where you could have a little sample of these methods.
Yeah, it was really, really a great event. And what we did, what came out of that was we met many health practitioners who want to do the same thing in their settings. We're doing well. Florida World Council for Health is doing a detox fair in October. There's a detox fair in Singapore, and I think there'll be 2 in Singapore between now and the end of the year. So, but also we feel that it can be done in a very simple manner. And that is, we call it actually Better Way Detox Days now. It has a nice ring, so it doesn't need to be a 2-day thing, a 1-day thing. It can be done in the community. You could have 4 speakers instead of 40. 4 speakers give them more time because we can all talk a long time, and it's great to give the speakers who've come a distance or in the community an hour, so to speak. So you could have 4 speakers with a panel conversation at the end, all speaking about how to detox, with solutions, very solutions focused. And then have exhibitors in that. And such an event held in a community village hall need not cost much at all, so one could charge $10 or something. And in this way, you're signposting the people in the community to those healers who are there and able to provide advice. You're providing the healers the platform to share their expertise. And it's a great way of connecting because I don't know about you, but I wish we were having this conversation in person, because I've just about had it with the Zoom and the screens, and being together in person is so much more fun.
You're absolutely right. The other area that I just want to touch on is the arts. So you talked about this kind of, it's sort of perfect because it comes full circle to what we were talking about you being a very creative child, but shy and being steered into the maths and sciences. And yet you did that beautiful reading of Mistakes Were Not Made.
Well, the poem was, obviously I can't take credit for that poem. That's Margaret Anna Alice. And it's really, really stunning, and I was very honored to be invited to read it. The arts for me, it's always been very integral to my life, but be it poetry or music or painting, and I feel that it's the key to getting us firmly on the path to a better world. So I have to say that right now I'm really not interested in looking at Twitter and all, more papers being shared and all that. And we know the situation. What we really need to do is get firmly on track in a joyful way, move towards creating the sort of world we want to live in. And that world is colorful, and there's music, and there's beauty, and creativity, and language, and so that's what I want, and what I'm working towards, what I hope others will feel as well. So I feel art is absolutely integral. Art will save us, will save humanity at this point. Science certainly won't. So I hope that people realize, and I hope artists who are listening to this realize how powerful and important you are at this time, at this point in time, when humanity is just finding itself again.
So this has been one of my questions, because I was before all this, I was an actor and a writer and a director, and I'm was so heartbroken that more artists didn't speak out. And while I don't want to focus on that, I'm curious if you have any ideas about why they didn't.
I think they've been systematically undermined by a science and reason-based paradigm for the longest time. Art's not valued. It hasn't been valued in this patriarchal system that we live in, and that's that's changing right now because we're not having it anymore. And I think. Yeah, the one thing that if you look at this transhumanist agenda and you look at these guys like Yuval Noah Harari and Klaus Schwab and that, there isn't a humor, there isn't a what do you call it, a bone of humor in them or any. They're just so this is how they have no imagination. There's no creativity in a transhumanist world in the agenda that they're building. There's this thing that they're thinking they're going to create with this dual caste system where they're in control and we're all cyborgs. They have no imagination, and it's not going to happen quite how they envisage. So this is how we I don't like the word beat them because that makes it sound like a competition. But how we create the new is and the better way, and people would much rather be in the better way in a better world than in their humorless, cold, and austere system. A better world is much more attractive, and I guess I'm rambling. I think I did say to you when I start rambling, it's probably time to quit.
Well, I will ask you one last thing, and I just want to say, so first of all, I really got from being with you in your office and showing your art, your husband's art, and I could see how much it meant to you, and it's clear that you understand the possibility of being sourced by art and how it can uplift us. And I actually listened again to the song on your Better Way events website, We Are Warriors. And I am going to add a link because I've been so focused, like many of us, on, the kind of doing things, and I have missed that inspiration. And I just felt my whole body, my whole spirit lifted when I heard that song.
I heard a great song today, Michelle, from a guy called, or it might be a woman called Happy Ruler on Twitter. And it wasn't shared to me on Twitter, but I've shared it on Twitter because It's a great song, and it's in Japanese, and it's got some subtitles. I'll put the link in for you as well because It really uplifted me. It's really a fun song.
I think it's so important, just coming back again to that personal responsibility and seeing it not as a burden, but as an opportunity to uplift us. And, it's like you said, if you have a job you don't like, get rid of it, because we are here right now and there is so much possible for us.
Yeah. We don't really know what's going on. I think, we're coming to the end of a system that doesn't work. We're birthing something new, and there's certainly a lot of questions. So, if I could give anyone some advice, let's embark on this joyful journey together, and put aside the fear of injections and all that scary stuff, and just move forward and trusting in ourselves, not in authorities and things, trusting in ourselves and God, or whatever source of wisdom you trust, your internal spirit. And let's just trust that everything's going to be okay in the end.
I'm so grateful to you. I'm so grateful to you for stepping over your fears of public speaking and becoming such a powerful and inspirational voice in creating this better way. I have been happily influenced by you for a couple of years now. I'm so grateful I got to meet you, and I wish we were in person so I could give you a hug.
Yeah, big hug.
So you will have to tell me when you're coming to Canada, and hopefully we can arrange to meet in person. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Well, just thank you very much, Michelle, for all the work you do. And it's been such an honor and pleasure speaking with you. And I hope we can do it again soon.
Me too. Thank you, Tess.
It's been many months since I sat down with Dr. Tess Lawrie for this conversation, and the world seems to have only gotten crazier, which makes Dr. Laurie's perspective and commitment even more relevant today. My overall experience in speaking with Tess and listening back to our conversation is one of hope and inspiration. Not hopium, not the hope that someone else, some doctor or politician or group, someone outside of ourselves will fix things, but the hope that inspires creative action rather than fear-based action. Allowing fear to direct us can only lead to short-term relief at best, but creating life rather than reacting to it allows for possibility itself. This is my first takeaway from this rich conversation. The second is and must be personal responsibility. Without it, hope becomes an analgesic, a numbing agent that temporarily takes away the pain but doesn't address the cause. And this is the opportunity we have. What Dr. Tess Lawrie called the challenge of self-mastery, something she demonstrates beautifully. Tess overcame shyness to become one of the most vocal and outspoken doctors of our time. She had the courage to expand her capacities and be the change. That is what's available to us all. And finally, 3 years after Tess first released her Zoom call with Dr. Andrew Hill, I am still moved by the dignity and strength she showed and shows. While many people are understandably still expressing anger and outrage, Dr. Lawrie focuses on our shared humanity. Ultimately, that is what will win the day and create the world in which we want to live. If you'd like to explore more of Dr. Tess Lawrie's work and the work of the World Council for Health, you will find links to their websites in the show notes. In addition, you can now order her brand new book, Game of Trust, The Lawrie Files. You'll also find that link below. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation and will join me for more. If you'd like, share your insights in the comments section, and please hit the subscribe button. Stay tuned, be true to yourself, and remember that we are the ones we've been waiting for.